Well, guess who's sick again? Looks like Team LH weren't joking with their death threats this time. I can barely read the words on this script and feel like I've been run over by an F1 car. Thankfully though, it was only Sergio Perez, as he wasn't going fast enough to cause any long-term damage. You probably couldn't give a damn about that, however, and neither does the F1 circus, which moved from Canada to Spain for the start of the triple header full of, well, maybe not Max Verstappen domination. The field really seems to have closed up recently, and coming into round 10 of the season, the Ferraris, McLarens, Mercedes and Max Verstappen were all in the mix. That sets us up for an exciting one in Barcelona, so here's your reminder to drop the channel a sub if you end up enjoying the content, and with that, let's get into the comedy review. It's the 2024 Spanish Grand Prix. The 2-week break between Canada and Spain leaves us with plenty to discuss on the news front, but our first story takes us to neither of those places. Let's talk about Silverstone. The British GP venue has clearly borrowed Lewis Hamilton's victim card this week, struggling to secure a sellout crowd for the July event and blaming this on Max Verstappen domination, and not the fact that you need to remortgage your kidney to even use one of their portable toilets. I'll be honest, it has been nice watching the F1 world unite to call out Stuart Pringle's verbal diarrhea, though will it change much? Probably not. Now I'm off to pack my bags for Hungary, which, even including flights and accommodation, is cheaper than me popping down the road. Also in the news, we have an imposter on our hands, as an anorexic Lewis Hamilton was spotted in the fan zone ahead of the weekend. Fair play to this guy though, who managed to fool quite the fan if this video is anything to go by, even if that did mean sacrificing his hairline. The FIA have pissed people off this week, adjusting their own rules on super licenses to seemingly allow Kimi Antonelli to end Logan Sargent's suffering as early as the summer break. I made a whole video on this last weekend if you're interested, but one thing I forgot to mention was the fact that while Red Bull fans are part of the group crying their salty eyes out over this one, it actually benefits the Milton Keynes-based team, given the amount of young talent bolstering their junior ranks. No, actually, my bad, I forgot the team doesn't use their junior program anymore. They're far too invested in Sergio Perez's palliative care. As we geared up for Friday practice, we were all expecting the news that homeboy Carlos Sainz had given up on a competitive F1 future and signed with Williams for 2025. It appears that announcement has since been delayed, perhaps partly due to Alpine stealing the Spaniard's thunder by whipping out their action replay and signing Flavio Briatore. If you didn't get that reference, turn your attention away from your mother's breast milk so I can spell it out for you. Briatore once ran the Alpine outfit in its Renault guise, until he was booted from the squad and F1 on a whole after allegedly fixing the 2008 Singapore Grand Prix. I'm not sure why I used allegedly there, it was pretty bloody obvious the man was practicing his crash on the formation lap. Anyway, after having his permanent ban lifted many years ago, no team has even risked touching the Italian since. That was until Alpine's desperation hit a new low, and so here we are. At least he appeared to scare their two drivers into actually doing their jobs come Friday, as Gasly secured 4th in FP2, and if you're wondering what happened to first practice, well, all happened, that's what. Okay, that's not strictly true, but it was no different to what we're now used to seeing on a Friday morning. Some issues with traffic, Ricciardo showing off his only bit of pace of the weekend, and the Red Bull drivers complaining about having no pace, except only one of them was telling the truth. Lando Norris would top the session from Verstappen and Carlos Sainz, while FP2 would see Mercedes show their hand as #Bless topped the second hour in his W15. Elsewhere, Valtteri Bottas made a mistake at turn 10, which is apparently due to being blocked by a figment of the Finn's imagination. In fairness to Porridge Man, 2024 sees a new addition to that corner, in the form of a bridge crossing the track just ahead of the braking zone. This should provide some fantastic shots of the cars as they enter the final sector, whilst also acting as a suicide hotspot for Lewis Hamilton fans. Getting back to the action, and Lando Norris would be another to have a scare in the runoff, though it didn't prevent him having another strong session. P3 for his efforts, the papaya outfit really cooking this weekend. That line became rather literal on Saturday morning, as the outfit's motorhome burst into flames ahead of FP3, and on the same weekend as Flavio Briatore's return. Surely that's too convenient to be a coincidence. The strangest thing about this blaze is that while the fire engine was on the scene within minutes, once the final practice session got underway, the emergency services appeared to just stop, returning to tackle the situation once they'd watched FP3. They also turned the Alpine motorhome into a whiteboard, which is probably the most useful they've been all season. The final practice session was a tad more entertaining than Friday's installments, as the 20 best drivers on the planet proceeded to utterly embarrass themselves. Carlos Sainz would please the Spanish crowd by topping the session, but it was his teammate Charles Leclerc who came away with the headlines, feeling blocked by Lando Norris and therefore proceeding to drive into him because that's the normal human response. That came just moments after a similar incident involving Lance Stroll and Lewis Hamilton, though I'm struggling to tell if this is down to stupidity on the Canadian's part or if this is just him performing to the best of his ability. Lance would come out after the incident and practically admit that the clash was on purpose, only for the stewards to award him with a reprimand because he's not Lewis Hamilton. That's what Twitter is saying anyway. With the officials on crack then, we geared up for qualifying, and RB were hoping to build on their strong pace in Canada last time out, bringing a whole host of new upgrades to their car for the weekend. When Daniel Ricciardo's Q1 effort only put him 15th, that wasn't a promising sign, especially as several cars behind still needed to finish their laps. One of those was Yuki Tsunoda. Though he'd been trailing his teammate all weekend long, I therefore thought it would be a clever idea to tweet this, which aged about as well as the McLaren motorhome. With no real surprises in the first part of qualifying, besides Sergio Perez actually making it through, let's get on with Q2. Here it would be the Aston Martins failing to make the cut, disappointment for Fernando Alonso on his 21st home Grand Prix start, but elation for Alpine, who got both cars through in what for me is the shock of the season so far. As attention turned to the fight for pole though, Max Verstappen appeared to be the man with the advantage. He would lead after the initial runs, though the McLarens and Mercedes were in hot pursuit. Well, I say McLarens, in reality that was just Norris. Oscar Piastri was busy abusing track limits on his first lap, then went hunting for pace in the gravel on his final attempt. Lando was looking like a major threat though, so much so that Red Bull opted to remind Perez of his contract situation, leading to the Mexican giving a tow to Verstappen. But it wouldn't be enough, as the McLaren was able to hook together the perfect lap and snatch pole from the Dutchman's fingertips, meaning it's time to remind you all how much you slacked me off for this video a few months ago. It was game on then for Sunday, Verstappen getting the better start and going into turn 1 alongside Lando Norris. As they picked their braking points, George Russell appeared to forget what a braking point was, swooping around the outside to take the race lead. Max allowed the Mercedes wet dream to last a handful of laps before he made it past Russell himself, before the Dutch Messiah tootled away into the distance. By lap 7, we'd now had no further overtakes, which meant Sky Sports were busy spotting invisible rain on the horizon. Meanwhile, it appeared there was a problem with the Aston Martin of Fernando Alonso. There was nothing visibly wrong with the car, it's just that he was being overtaken by Valtteri Bottas. So with quite literally nothing going on, let's do our weekly Daniel Ricciardo watch. He was running in the points and 9 spots ahead of Tsunoda. We'll just ignore the fact that only one of them had pitted though. Lap 16 would see the first of the leaders pit. George Russell attempted to trigger a series of stops from the cars behind. When Mercedes proceeded to utterly butcher that pit stop, no one paid much notice however. Verstappen would pit a few laps later, with the future of this race now resting on Red Bull cocking this up. Unfortunately, they delivered a 1.9 second stop, and I think that's this one in the bag. Alpine delivered something slightly different when Pierre Gasly's right rear decided it wanted a few extra laps around the circuit to Catalunya. Gotta feel sorry for the mechanic on that one. Reports are already coming in that Briatore's just murdered his entire family. At third race distance, something rather odd happened. We got an overtake. Hamilton barging his way past Sainz, whose subsequent tears forced teams to consider switching to the intermediates. Up at the front though, Lando Norris was finally pitting, losing massive track position around a circuit where it's about as easy to overtake as it is for Justin Timberlake to drive sober. He wasn't going down without a fight though, making it past Sainz, then quickly catching up to the pair of Mercs up the road. Sky made the comment that if the Silver Arrows showed some teamwork, they could hold the McLaren up a bit. A concept I think is funnier than anything I've said in this comedy review. Sure enough, Lando was soon up to second, following a phenomenal battle with Russell, and fair play, this actually woke me up. The gap to leader Verstappen continued to fall over the next 10 laps, until the Dutchman pitted with 20 tours still to go. A handful later and Norris was in, just coming out ahead of George Russell, and now hunting down Verstappen for the win. As all this was going on, we had a change for the final spot on the podium, Hamilton getting one on the outside of his teammate, in a move that was particularly impressive when you remember just how much the team were apparently sabotaging his car this season. Meanwhile, it was looking like we were set for a second year of the Spanish Grand Prix, giving us no retirements and not even a single yellow flag. It appeared this was just down to the track firing all of its marshals, when no yellows were presented for Albon's interesting line through turn 4 here. What about that scrap for the lead though? Well, given we're cutting to the final lap, that pretty much gives you your answer, doesn't it? Verstappen took the victory with a comfortable margin to Norris and Hamilton behind, and shout out to Sergio Perez, by the way, who just about beat off the Alpines on the final lap. You truly are f***ing aren't you? I can't tell whether I enjoyed this race or not in the end. I think the best way to gauge how interesting a Max victory is to look at how many times Sky mentioned the non-existent weather about to hit the circuit. I've been documenting that over on my Twitter, my counter getting up to 5, meaning we had a mention on average every 13 laps or so. Yeah, we've had far better Grand Prix this season, but on the bright side, it does set us up for an exciting second half of the year. McLaren look just as quick as Red Bull now, and with Austria coming up next week, I think we're in for an absolute thriller. Let me know what you thought of the race down in the comments and in the poll over on my community page. And if you enjoyed the comedy review, be sure to drop it a like and get subscribed, as I'll be covering every race this season right here on the channel. We've also got IndyCar happening this evening, and if that race was anything to go by last year, well, we're in for another demolition derby. I'll have my video out on that tomorrow, so be sure to watch out for that one. A final thank you goes out to my members and patrons, who get early comedy previews to these now. If that and early access to the rest of my content sounds interesting to you, or you just want to help support me and the channel, check out the links in the description down below. I'll be back very soon then with another video, but until then, have a good one.